We're a nonprofit organization dedicated to eradicating human slavery, human trafficking, child exploitation, and child sexual abuse material through disrupting networks and applying data, technology, and advanced analytics and intelligence.
Hi, welcome everyone to discuss cryptocurrency, human trafficking, cryptocurrency from the exchange perspective. Today we have quite a loaded panel with us, and I will let everyone introduce themselves. I will be the moderator for the panel. My name is Pamela Clegg. I am the Vice President of Financial Investigations for CipherTrace, a MasterCard company, and we are a blockchain analytics firm, if you're not familiar with CipherTrace. I'm going to do a round robin and let everybody give a brief introduction of themselves. We'll start with Ian.
Hi, my name's Ian Minot. My background is in government and law enforcement in the UK, but my current role is FIU manager at Kraken Digital Asset Exchange. So I'm responsible for our global intelligence and investigations.
Thanks. Mike?
Thanks, Pamela. Mike Carter, CCO at Bittrex. We are a global cryptocurrency exchange. My background is former military and former EY, former Alvarez Marcel.
Perfect. Gabby?
Hi, my name is Gabriela Cruz, and I'm the CEO of the Global Digital Asset and Cryptocurrency Association. My background is international financial sector and economic development with a focus on anti-corruption, poverty reduction, and shared prosperity.
Great, thanks. And not last or least, but John?
Hi, my name's John Kathanik. I am Vice President of Global Intelligence for Coinbase, Inc. I can't remember what my background is other than 22 years of fintech, helped start PayPal's investigations group many years ago. Yeah.
Thanks so much. So let's just jump right in to some of the topics that we have for today. I think it's really important to talk about when we refer to human trafficking and ways that cryptocurrency exchanges can identify that within their organization, to really talk about the customer life cycle. So if we could, please, let's start with Mike. If you could just give us an overview of the customer life cycle at the exchange, and then everybody else is welcome to join in and add to.
Absolutely. And so just from a high level, and as Pam mentioned, we can delve into specific topics after. Taking a look at the exchange obligations. Also, you may hear us use the word BASP interchangeably with exchange today. I think the customer lifecycle is a really good tool to think about what the obligations are and what, frankly, what really proactive things that exchanges are doing to prevent all financial crime, but specifically CSAM as well. So the life cycle starts at the beginning with the customer application, the customer onboarding. The key activities there would be first and foremost a sanctions screening event, as well as a PEP screening, but also an adverse media negative news, trying to figure out what intelligence is out there, what intelligence information is out there about our customer that will help us make risk decisions, both at the onset of the relationship and then on an ongoing basis. You may also execute some ID verification, depending on your business model and your risk appetite, and what your customer is allowed to do. You're also likely going to, at some point early in the relationship, conduct a source of funds, employment verification, review criminal history, and potentially review social media. I feel like John has lots of thoughts on almost all of these things. And then past that initial stage of customer onboarding, we are actually obligated as regulated exchanges to conduct ongoing monitoring of our customers. And so that includes one, transaction monitoring. And so if you offer blockchain and fiat, you are monitoring blockchain transactions and fiat transactions. Of note, and I think this actually comes into play with regards to any CSAM investigations, generally blockchain investigations tend to be more intelligence-based. So there may be some time lag in your alerting in your within your monitoring rules. Fiat tends to be more mathematic algorithm based, so it's more real time, and those can mean different things for for identifying red flags within your customer population. Up past that, you may do periodic KYC refreshes. You may, based on certain activity, request certain information from your customer. You may do specific transaction inquiries. You may update their source of funds, source of wealth. There's a variety of informational, attributional updates you may do throughout the life cycle of your customer's time on your platform. From there, if there is an alert or some outside information, you may choose to conduct an investigation on a specific customer, whether it be, that investigation is based on information known about the customer or their actual behaviors on your platform. Or the great thing about blockchain investigations and blockchain transaction monitoring, you may initiate an investigation about behavior on somebody else's platform that you've picked up through your monitoring tools. And then from there, and this sort of goes towards the negative life cycle, all customer relationships do eventually end. From the sort of adverse side of things, if there's an investigation that may result in a SAR or other locally required reporting, you may choose to terminate the relationship with that customer, and that can mean different things for you as well with regards to your reporting obligations and cooperation with law enforcement. I will stop there.
Great. John, Ian, you guys want to add anything to the life cycle at your exchanges?
Yeah, I think everybody's fairly similar. If I had to guess, we onboard the client, take a look at them with automated processes, throw them through a KYC process, EDD, depending, it's risk-based. So, if they're moving, $500 a year, we're probably not going to, check under the hood too much. But if they're doing, several $1,000s a week or a month or whatever, we're going to, obviously look more deeply into what they're doing and ask them questions about source of funds and stuff like that. I think the benefit of groups like this, CipherTrace, TRM, Our Data, you guys, at the other exchanges and stuff like that is, we're able to, assign some attribution to bad addresses. So, we're constantly monitoring for that. We're able to blacklist. So if a customer bumps up against any of that kind of stuff, we're able to, very quickly review it, confirm the information that we have, and take the steps that Mike was referring to, filing SARs if required, or if needed. And my team specifically would reach out to law enforcement directly and try to start a criminal case on them very quickly. Yeah.
Great. Ian, talking specifically about CSAM, can we talk a little bit about what you're able to do to detect and combat that, specifically there within the UK?
Yeah, sure. I mean, and so really building on some of the points that have been made earlier, I think crypto really does provide quite significant opportunities around identifying criminal activity. And that includes the abuse of children and the buying and selling of child abuse material online. So at Kraken, we work really hard to try and identify that activity using some of the tools that have been mentioned already. And I think, the customer life cycle you've heard about is kind of pretty similar in many respects to that which, takes place in traditional financial institutions. I think the thing that's different with crypto and with exchanges is that ability to kind of look at activity on chain. So in that sense, the use of blockchain analytics means that exchanges such as ourselves can see whether our clients are sending or receiving crypto to clusters or to addresses that are associated with child abuse material. And we can see whether those transactions are happening directly, or we can also see if they're happening indirectly. So we get alerts on that, and when we receive those are classified as high risk, and so that means that those are treated as a priority, and we handle them quite dynamically. And if those investigations identify suspicious activity, we of course submit SARs on that. And it's really good to see that those SARs do often get picked up by law enforcement. And in those circumstances, if further information, further help is required, for example, information to assist with a criminal case, or even more general guidance in interpreting the blockchain data, then we work closely with law enforcement to provide that.
And with whether it's the UK, whether it's the US, we have seen, for example, FinCEN put in their priorities human trafficking, as well as other hot topics that have been included within their priority structure. Gabby, what do you think about those priorities and how they do or don't affect a particular organization like an FI's list of priorities? Have we seen a change because of FinCEN including that?
So I think, it's one, I'd like to applaud the fact that FinCEN did include that as a key priority. And I think, at least from our side, a lot of what we focus on is trying to educate our members about not only the requirements around AML KYC and some of the other, evaluative steps, but also helping them understand what the impact of those actions are. So a lot of times we'll get, newer emerging members that come in. These may be smaller, medium businesses that are still building out their systems of compliance and operations. And so one of the key pieces that, we do in many cases, because we formally onboard our members, is to go through and ensure that they align with our requirements for AML KYC, that they are appropriately vetted through OFAC sanctions, that they align with our code of conduct, which includes ethical aspects of this, and that, we're sort of a first line of finding or identifying any types of weaknesses or issues, and that those can be remediated ahead of joining our membership. In that, what we found is that, a lot of times people are not purposely trying to evade or to avoid some of the requirements that are there, but they themselves are still kind of learning. So they've had the fintech component of this well done, but now it's that they're trying to build out the operations. And so for that, one of the pieces that we focus on is really education and ensuring that people understand that, yes, these are requirements that exist. You may find them to be burdensome, but please understand that there's a real world impact to what you're doing. And why we're doing this is exactly around, protecting the 70% of human trafficked people who are women, the 50% that are children, and that this is a really important step and necessary in order to help enhance the integrity of this entire asset class. So, we greatly applaud the work that you all are doing, and we align with it and try to embody it as our own priority in terms of moving forward.
And let's talk about the reporting obligations. John, you mentioned already reaching out to law enforcement, getting a case started if it reaches that threshold. What exactly are the reporting obligations for cryptocurrency exchanges, for those that maybe aren't aware that cryptocurrency exchanges within the US at least are registered money service businesses and have a whole host of FinCEN requirements that go along with that? I think you're on mute, John.
Sorry,
Right.
technology always baffles me. So I would say we have the same reporting requirements as money service businesses, and very similar to the banks and stuff. So when we run across, whether it's a human trafficking case, dope case, guns, money laundering, or whatever, we very quickly file the SAR. I think the more important part of what my team does, because we're outside of the compliance org, I think the more important part, at least for my org, is to very quickly get that information to law enforcement. Unfortunately, just because of the way the system works, a lot of times the SAR goes and sits in kind of a black hole for a while. One of the things that I think is really good about what FinCEN's doing lately, or has been doing since kind of I started in crypto, is they're very interested in getting up to speed on crypto. They're very interested in understanding what's going on with crypto. So I think they look at almost every SAR that comes through. So I think our stuff is getting actioned much quicker than a lot of other folks, not trying to disparage anybody, but I think it's a really good thing that FinCEN is doing this, because it for example, when we were starting PayPal, nobody understood. It was all a bunch of old number two kind of pencil guys like I am, and they just didn't understand the tech. But FinCEN, IRS, CID, Secret Service, DOJ, everybody in this space, HSI is doing a really good job with crypto investigations. And so what we try to do is we try to get that into their back pocket as quickly as possible, so they can take action on it and go after the bad guys. But again, with the SARs, they're reviewing them very quickly. I guess you'd say early and often, to kind of paraphrase the voting thing. But anyway, sorry, I'm kind of spinning around in circles here, but I think the system is really, really good now. With the UK, we get IWC's working with us. We've got NICMAC. We've got all these other organizations that are helping us get this information to the government very quickly.
Great. Same thing, Ian, for you guys in the UK as well?
We're reporting globally, including into the UK, US, everywhere. And I'd agree with what John says, that the stuff we're putting in, does seem to be getting looked at, and I think that's very positive. We'd always like to have more feedback. That's that kind of information. Is like gold dust. It really kind of helps us get better and better at our investigations and our SARS writing. But at Kraken, we're really pleased. We do get some good feedback on occasion. I think in terms of human trafficking and kind of as I was alluding to earlier, within that category, most of what we see is kind of CSAM, and I think that's by no means complacency on our part. We kind of remain, we remain very vigilant, and for that purpose, we're really pleased that we're becoming diamond members of the ATII, and really hope that that's going to give us, some more useful information that we can use to drive proactive investigations and kind of drive actionable suspicious activity reporting.
Yeah, we have certainly seen, FinCEN, at least from the US perspective, talk about the increase in the number of SARs with regard to crypto. So there's definitely a lot coming in. I feel like it's, whether you're a traditional FI or an NBFI, the feedback from law enforcement is always wanted, right? We always want to know that our information is making an impact when it goes in on the law enforcement side. What about the obligation to freeze funds or to not freeze funds? How does that play in to an exchange? What is an exchange's obligation? And does that change from jurisdiction to jurisdiction? Mike, if you want to take first stab at this one.
Yeah, I'll get started. This sort of delves into, if our head of legal is on here, that would be a great conversation as well. Ultimately, just from a principled approach, I don't think you're ever going to get in trouble freezing funds of illicit activity. Now, probably not forever, and there are certainly various freeze orders and obligations that and non-obligations that could create some risk for you if you're freezing a user's funds. That goes against their rights or your toss. But I mean, ultimately, if I suspect somebody of human trafficking, CSAM, whatever it is, I'm absolutely willing to freeze those funds and say, all right, well, come after me. Let's do this. If you want to engage in law enforcement, and I have a reasonable belief that you're undertaking these activities, I'm happy to have at it. So,
what about Gabby with your members? Do you guys discuss the obligations, or how does that play in, especially based in different jurisdictions where they might be located?
Sure. I mean, I think it's a really good question. And we dealt with this a lot when we were looking at the Ukraine sanctions that were coming up and the conflict there. I think from our side, we have been directing our members to, try to think, Well, one, with everything that's been going on, especially with the use of crypto to support the Ukrainian military, support around humanitarian relief issues, we've actually created like a crypto resource hub for our members, but also for the general public. And this was an opportunity to kind of crowdsource and identify both, some publicly available handbooks for AML KYC, and then also to help people around, how to and what they should be doing from a cybersecurity perspective, as well as from the perspective of just having greater eyes and insight on the activity that's happening on their exchanges. What we directed was just to keep abreast of any of the moves that we saw coming either from OFAC or from the US government more broadly, and to ensure that you were staying in step. And in terms of other jurisdictions, that's a piece that we have use with a number of different jurisdictions around the world and their self-regulatory movements. And so this was how we kind of helped at least to crowdsource information for our member exchanges around, what is it that is expected, to ensure that they had the most up-to-date information so that as they were undertaking operations, they could ensure that it was in alignment. From our side, our focus has really been on following the letter of the law, ensuring that you have up-to-date information and that you are making that information actionable as soon as possible. And to the degree that we can, as a membership organization, sharing insight with the balance of our members so that everybody else is kind of up to speed. So whoever kind of hears first or what degree they're approaching this, to have sort of an open door policy about supporting one another during this time.
And to that, I think, if you're going to be aggressive in freezing the proceeds of CSAM, there are ways to do that, and I think it flows into the reporting discussion we just had, where freeze the funds while you're doing the investigation. You're most of the time you're fine doing that. It's not in perpetuity. It's a limited amount of time. File a SAR, and then reach out to law enforcement with whatever mechanism that is for you. And often, and then once you have that court order, whatever the legal authority is to maintain those as frozen funds, continuing to hold those assets, then you're protected at that point. So there are risk-averse ways of being aggressive in the space.
Great, thank you. I also think, just to throw a little bit of a curveball, one of the things that I think crypto does really well is with regard to sanctions. When we look at the Ronin Bridge exploit, that was linked to North Korea, and within 3 weeks of that exploit taking place, we already had addresses up on the OFAC SDN list, right? And I think a lot of times maybe others don't realize how quickly how quickly the pace is in crypto and getting those addresses essentially blacklisted by putting them on the sanctions list. Would it be more efficient? Would there be a higher impact, I should say, if those found guilty of CSAM and human trafficking actually had their addresses listed on OFAC SDN, like a lot of these other, like the Chinese fentanyl guys and the Ronin Bridge exploit, and then some of the other, the first ones, right? The CSAM ransomware guys that were first put on the OFAC SDN list. How would that make your jobs easier or more efficient? Ian, do you want to take a first stab?
I think it could help in certain circumstances. I mean, I think kind of from our point of view, the kind of the ability of vendors to actually kind of understand and to identify these addresses and kind of provide us with that data is already kind of in a pretty advanced state, actually. But certainly definitive statements from government agencies is always a helpful thing as well.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I just so when it comes to CSAM and human trafficking, stuff like that, it's our experience that it's fairly rare in our system. Two, I think a lot of times, because of the way it works, because of the way crypto's a really bad way for bad guys to pay for stuff. They may, the novices may think it's a good way, but it's not. I think everybody here would agree that because of the cooperation, because of the blockchain, because of the transparency of a lot of these things, we're able to shut stuff down pretty quickly. So it's very rare that we run across an account that actually has, any balance of note. When it does happen, like Mike was saying, we're happy to kind of investigate, shut it down while we're taking a look at it, file the SAR, reach out to law enforcement, get a seizure if it warrants it. Our job at the corporate level is not necessarily to adjudicate the case, even a little bit. So we have to be very careful with that kind of stuff, and we take great pains to make sure that we're not making accusations against somebody that's not true or whatever. So we're always very, very confident. And I think Mike was kind of alluding to this. It's like, by the time we make the decision to shut down an account, it's like, if you want to take us to court and stand up there and say, yeah, I had a $10,000 balance in my account because I was buying child porn, more power to you. We'd love the opportunity to do that. Take you on with that, I think. At the end of the day, though, the balances are usually negligible. They move the money fairly quickly, but most importantly, we're finding out about it very, very quickly. As far as like SEN lists and stuff like that, I think that's a good idea. At some point, it becomes a little bit of a game of whack-a-mole. They're able to kind of change stuff very quickly, but at least it depletes their ability to use these addresses, which is always a good thing.
And I think it's not just addresses. I think it's actually names of folks, like what used to be the quote unquote traditional SDN list. Show me names of people. Now I understand that we've got other tools that we can find this information about customers, but often that's incomplete information. So we're trying to guess if a John Smith, sorry if there's any John Smiths listening to this, if there's a John Smith, with convicted of CSAM related activities. Okay, well, there's a lot of those out there, right? So, and without other attributions, if we're just pulling from OSINT news articles, whatever it is, it's actually quite difficult for us to positively say, yes, this John Smith is the one engaging in this activity. So, it goes back to, I think somebody mentioned the definitive stances. But a definitive stance in this particular case would really help, especially alluding to what John mentioned. A lot of these are really, it's rare, at least on our exchange, and I think John mentioned on his as well. It's a really bad way to conduct this activity. But two, it's usually really low threshold. It's very similar to terrorist financing. It costs $50 to make a roadside bomb. That's going to fall under almost everybody's standard alert thresholds if you're not thinking about it that way. And it's the same thing for CSAM. So to the original point, I think more than just addresses, because those can change pretty easily and quickly. Having actual persons attributed in a single repository would be helpful. I think there's challenges with that, but in a perfect world, absolutely.
Great. And what about the addition of exchanges here lately? We've seen, now there's 3 exchanges. What about the difference? You guys have all of these reporting obligations. You have all of these requirements that you have to follow, the regulations that you have to follow. But we all know that there are some places in the world where exchanges operate and they don't have any of those obligations and they don't comply with FATF recommendations, or, if their country doesn't have any regulations, they still don't kind of look globally at the broader scale. What are some of the challenges with that you guys come across? And is there a way for us to, and I say us as in kind of, those combating human trafficking and CSAM, what are some ways to get those exchanges to maybe fall in line a little bit more?
Yeah, Pamela, if I can talk about that very quickly. So it's a big point. I mean, we see a lot of these cases where bad funds are going to exchanges overseas. They're continuing to do business in the United States, even though it's illegal. They have customers coming from the United States into their exchanges. A lot of bad funds are flowing into that. I think we all see this, whether it's in our tools or whatever. and it's very frustrating. I think everybody on this panel will agree that we spend tens of millions of dollars to get to get licensed and do the right thing and hire and get staff going, and help protect the financial structures of our countries. And these other ones, these other folks have this big time competitive edge against us because they're not regulated. They're not spending the money that we're spending, and we get frustrated sometimes when we see this because it's just unfair kind of business practice, I think. And we don't seem to be doing anything about that in the United States.
So if I can step into from our side. So, a lot of the inequality and unlevel playing field between, those exchanges that are trying to advance a high quality product that's in line with good standards and best practices, and what you're seeing, in some of the other lower quality exchanges that are just effectively trying to churn and burn. I think, one of the things that we've focused on, again, is focusing on a global remit. And part of the reason that we do that is because of this opportunity to kind of go offshore and to, evade or avoid some of the regulations, including those that deal with, human trafficking. I think, one of the pieces that we've seen is that in order to have influence at a global level, it's important to be able to engage with some of the good actors in those jurisdictions that are trying to stand up, for example, other self-regulatory movements. And so I've actually worked very heavily with those in Nigeria, those in India, to try to help them to identify, to support, and to build out systems, or even, their codes of conduct, or so on and so forth. Because at this point, most regulators around the world, and those are still trying to understand how and in what way you would create regulations. And then the next step is going to be, from their side, building internal capacity to be able to implement those. And until such time as that happens, there's going to be a gap in the market, and that creates that inequity between and amongst exchanges, which harms those that are having to incur some of those heavier costs. So to help level that playing field, being able to have a presence or some level of support or a partner who's trying to promote good activity and strong regulation, as well as sound behavior and stewardship of the industry within and amongst those jurisdictions that we know potentially could cause difficulties, is very important to shaping influence in terms of the broader industry. And so that, I think, is a component of this. So as opposed to going government to government, waiting for each government to go ahead and take a step, going through private sector and helping to support, pump up, and assist those movements that are trying to do the right thing, trying to advance strong AML KYC. That, I think, is what we've sort of seen as the best and most appropriate approach in order to help enhance impact in a short period of time.
And if I may come in there as well, Pamela. So, I think, just to extend the point, I think, as well as kind of challenges from jurisdictions where there's weak AML controls and exchanges are able to operate in those environments, I think there are, in relation to this particular topic of human trafficking and CSAM, I think there are challenges more broadly across jurisdictions that have comparatively strong AML frameworks. So, there's a lack of harmonization about money laundering definitions as they apply to victim-based crimes such as this. So in some jurisdictions, and I'd say the US is a front runner here, payments for illicit goods and services, such as for CSAM material, are very clearly covered as money laundering offences. So that means there's kind of very clear and unambiguous requirements to make SARs, and we very much welcome that. In certain other jurisdictions, for example, the UK, those payments are not included within the definition of money laundering. So the definition of money laundering can often relate to the proceeds of crime, and in these types of cases, the money is clean at the point it's sent. So that kind of puts exchanges that want to do the right thing and do report, in a potentially quite difficult position. And it also means that those, kind of the type of exchanges that are not represented here today, who are not so well motivated, have a reason for not reporting. And consequently, there's a risk there that the authorities will get less actionable information that helps protect victims, helps protect children. And I think, I think this is particularly concerning, given that we know that this activity is a law enforcement priority, and quite rightly so. So, I think there's a policy issue here internationally that jurisdictions should consider in terms of getting the legislation in a consistent and clear position.
I think it's a little tough. There was an article that came out yesterday about global regulation. It sounds fantastic. Are we close to that? Not even close. So I think from an exchange perspective of, hey, you've got a potential customer / partner who operates in a low to no regulated jurisdiction. Coinbase, Kraken, certainly Bittrex as well. As John mentioned, we're dedicating tons and tons of resources to getting this right. So I think from a principled approach, do you have standards or not, right? And so you've got standards for yourself. Why would you allow a partner or customer, no matter where they are, whether it's high regulation or no regulation, why would you enable a customer or partner who doesn't have their own standards that are reasonable? And not everything's going to be a 1-for-1 match. Their policies aren't going to be and controls aren't going to be cut and pasted from yours. But what is reasonable, right? So you don't have to be in a highly regulated jurisdiction to do the right thing. And your senior compliance folks, when they're onboarding these partners or customers, they know what right looks like. And so having that standard, again, and that's just broadly, right? But getting down to the CSAM part, if we're not, let's go back to the customer lifecycle. If they're not appropriately onboarding, appropriately KYC, appropriately monitoring their customers within some bounds of reason, I'm not sure why you would want that relationship to begin with.
I think that's a great point as well. What about cooperation? So we've talked about, obviously, there's differencing levels of regulatory obligation around the globe. What about cooperation from law enforcement around the globe? I know all of the exchanges here respond to law enforcement requests from all over. Can you talk about that just a little bit? John, if you want to just kind of give an overview of what does that look like when a law enforcement entity from somewhere sends you a subpoena or production order, or what does that process look like, and how quickly does it move in the crypto world?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, recently we just started we implemented a portal, a secure portal to be able to communicate back and forth with law enforcement. We tried to use some of the web browsing, secure the information, send it back and forth, and it wasn't working really well for us. And one of the other things we were seeing that was a little problematic was we would get fake subpoenas in trying to get information from folks. So we set up this portal with Codex. Does a really good job for us, and it gives us a little bit more or a lot more kind of security and knowledge that this is a real subpoena. So once we get that in, I've got duty investigators. They take the subpoena on their duty day, and they go from soup to nuts with it. Whether that requires them to testify or whatever. They get in, they take a look, and a lot of times I think the benefit of the way we do it is we'll get one address, and they won't know that much about the address other than it's associated with some bad activity. The investigators then able to kind of go out, use the blockchain, get a lot more information for law enforcement. It'll come back to a Coinbase account, and then it'll go back out to a Binance account, or it hops around, and we're able to find this stuff. So a lot of times we actually end up finding a real name or a real person behind this, because they think that if they get through enough hops and they do enough things, that once they come back to, say, a Coinbase account or back to another account, another exchange, that they're safe, and they're not. So now we've got, law enforcement's got a name and an address, and they go kick the door in and gather the information. So the other thing is the blockchain gives us the ability to kind of grab a ton of information very, very quickly. Whether it's CipherTrace, TRMA, any of these analytics companies that we mentioned earlier, it gives us a very powerful ability to really kind of find things quickly, big chunks of data, and it just kind of explodes from there. So a lot of the cases that they send us turns out fairly small, but we're able to find about a bunch of other stuff. The welcome to video case was a great example of that. Working with IRS CID, they give us some information, we give them back a bunch more information, they give us back a bunch more information, and it just kind of goes from there. And it's just very, very powerful tool. We try to get the subpoenas back to law enforcement within, depending on the size. Now, if it's hundreds and hundreds of accounts or addresses that we're looking up, it might take us a few days, but each duty investigator tries to clear their caseload out that day. They'll get 20 subpoenas and they'll try to get all of those cleared out within that 24-hour period.
Great. Mike, Ian, similar process for you guys?
Yeah, pretty similar, I'd say. Pretty similar to what John says. I mean, I think as well as the kind of operational cooperation, what's really beneficial in this space is, more thematic and strategic cooperation with law enforcement. So we're pleased to take part in a number of groups around the world that undertake that type of work. So in the UK, we chair an NCA, a National Crime Agency group on cryptocurrency. In Ireland, there's a really fantastic group, the FinTech Intelligence Task Force. So groups like that are really useful in terms of understanding law enforcement priorities, being able to talk to other firms about what's going on, and improve our processes. I think also, if I may just highlight, there's kind of lots of potential for cooperation here at the multilateral level. I know from my previous time in law enforcement of some really good work, for example, undertaken by the Egmont group of FIUs on the subject of live streaming of child sexual abuse material. If it's a really good report, if anyone hasn't seen it, and it contains some useful information for firms and some opportunities for future collaboration. So I think kind of as well as the operational collaboration and the response to production orders and so on, I think more kind of public-private partnerships are really useful in this type of space.
Yeah, I think Ian and John hit most of it. I'll just end with it's useful in a number of ways, not just for CSAM, not just for responding to law enforcement requests and subpoenas, to hire, build, train additional specific resources for this, because the communication piece is really vital. One, again, we're not law enforcement, so we've described some of the steps that we can take. It basically stops there. So law enforcement is going to do law enforcement things. Let's help them within the bounds of reason, and dedicate those appropriate resources to it. And there's lots of second and third order positive effects for that, and I think it helps identify and lower your overall risk profile, having those teams and cooperating with law enforcement on a regular basis.
So I'll take a little bit of a different approach too, and just say that, like, from our side, we're not an exchange, but our focus is really on ensuring that people have the capacity and knowledge and education on some of these subjects. And so, one of the things that I've been very vocal about is offering to any of the law enforcement agencies, especially those where we know that there is an increase in crypto activity, to, write letters of support for enhancing budget and for increasing training and capacity or staffing so that they have the resources they need in order to be effective. And then from our side, a lot of our events we've done for free and have had a big, strong focus on trying to bring together both public and private sector so that you have that knowledge sharing. So there's up-to-date insight and perspective on, what some of the key trends are. And then you also have the ability to begin to foment, or at least enhance some of the relationship building between and amongst, government agencies and private sector actors. But I think a lot of it stems from communication, education, and then keeping open channels of communication more broadly.
That's a great point. Education is a big feature of CipherTrace. I lead all of our education efforts, and it's very important. I think one of the challenges I think sometimes is law enforcement will get to an address a Bitcoin address and then just throw their hands up like, oh, that's it. They're in crypto. There's nothing we can do. And, that's contrary to what John just explained, right? Where actually from one address, we can build out so much more information. There's so much that is actually available just from having that one little detail. And so just knowing what's possible is a big factor. Just the last question that we'll close with today. We've talked about law enforcement. What about other FIs? What if another FI has a question or another FI is looking at some type of suspicious activity? Can they talk to a cryptocurrency exchange?
Yeah,
Yes.
I think.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah. The short answer is yes. I mean, we're 314B registered. We get a lot of 314Bs. We try to, get those back out as quickly as possible to the counterparty that's asking the information. I wish they would be a little faster getting information back to us. They feel it's like a one-way street sometimes, I think. But they send us 314Bs. We have some informal communication. I think all of us probably know so many people in the industry that work at banks and credit unions and every aspect of the tech world. And I'll get emails saying, hey, what are you seeing? And I don't even necessarily have to get back to that person, the investigator at a bank or whatever. It's just kind of a nice way to get a heads up that something bad is going on. And I think it's crucial. I think the ability for, these bad guy organizations, they are cooperating with each other. They are cross-border, Nigerians are working with Romanians are working with the Chinese. It just, no matter where you look, they're cooperating. So it kind of behooves us to cooperate a little bit too, and within the rights of the privacy rights of our customers and stuff like that. But I'm really proud of the effort. And if I could just say one thing about the law enforcement and the training, I will tell you, after 22 years in the industry, there is a major difference between doggone law enforcement back in 1999, 2000, where, like I said, they were number two pencil kind of folks, and they weren't really embracing technology. And what we see with the agents today, it's a night and day difference. I'm really very proud of law enforcement, especially in the U.S. and the UK and mainland Europe. It just they do such a great job, and they're great partners. Especially when it comes to tough stuff like human trafficking or whatever. Yeah.
Great. Yes. So I think everybody had a resounding yes. Please don't be afraid to talk to your cryptocurrency exchange, your local friendly cryptocurrency exchange. More than happy to assist if they can. All right, great. Well, that's all that we have time for today. So I'm just going to wrap things up here by thanking every member of the panel today. It's been a really great conversation, and look forward to doing this again with you guys. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Pamela.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.